Well, it's nice to have one of my kids come home to roost. I hate to admit that because I have more hair than he does. No, I'm just kidding. Paul Coughlin's in the studio with us, an ex-Dover, and but called of God to take on an area in our culture that is absolutely overwhelming us in so many ways. Paul is now the founder of the Protectors, an international organization that works to prevent bullying. And front page news yesterday as you were commenting on what happened in Ashland, but the subject of bullying, Paul, it's just all over the place.
It is, Perry. I mean, as you know, we've been doing this for about 10 years, and when we started, you know, people thought, well, it's a good idea, but they didn't quite see how necessary it is. And boy, it is now the #1 form of violence that a school-age kid will experience in their lifetime, and yet it's probably the most misunderstood form of violence out there as well. A lot of myths.
And there are some interesting links to some of these tragedies that we're seeing in schools, primarily from kids that have been bullied.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to say it, but it's there.
Well, yeah, it's a major contributing factor, Perry. Is it the only factor? No. But you know, the Secret Service interviewed 37 school shooters, asked them why they did it. 85%, almost all of them, said they did it because they had been bullied. And Perry, a lot of us like to think that, you know, that these kids snapped. They didn't. Statistically, most every one of them planned it for weeks, months, even years. So, and is it the only factor that's involved in these school shootings? No. I mean, there have been issues of antidepressants playing a role. Kids coming out for Prozac in particular. So it's not just bullying, but it's a major contributing factor. It's a major contributing factor, Perry, as to why more and more people aren't going to church, by the way. These kids who have, we have numerous letters, parents whose children have special needs. A special needs kid is more likely to be bullied than probably any other kind of kid.
Right, sadly, isn't it? Yeah.
And what they're finding is that in Sunday school in particular, in youth groups, their kids are being bullied in the church. And when they tell authority about it, they tell the person in charge. They're saying that really nothing is being done to alleviate it. And I'm not surprised, and it's not because, Perry, the church doesn't care. That's not the issue.
They're not trained.
We're not trained in how to recognize it and to intervene.
All right, I want to come back have you comment on the Ashland hazing. What was that incident?
Well, I know what was basically in the paper is that there was a football camp. It was off campus, and I got to tell you, I feel kind of sorry for the Ashland School District. I mean, it didn't even take place there. I believe it was in McMinnville or Newburgh, I can't remember which, but it was a football camp off campus involving a minority of players, you know, and that's bullying and hazing. It's a small percentage that usually gets involved in this kind of behavior. But it seems like and what happened was taunting and teasing seemed to lead, as I understand it, to assault, and particularly a kind of sexual assault. And I know some people find that hard to believe. With bullies receive pleasure from another person's pain. Why do bullies bully? Because they enjoy it. They enjoy it. They like it. I just gave you part of the definition of sadism, right? Wow. Well, with boys in particular, it moves very quickly. It can move quickly into sadomasochism, which is enjoying sexual pleasure from another person's pain. I didn't make the rules. This is how it goes down. If you want to learn more about that, Dr. Philip Zimbardo of Stanford has written extensively on this connection between hazing, bullying, and sadomasochism. Well, what happened is and this is usually the case, it seems as if there was one ringleader who got other kids, because these other kids don't have, the 3 other boys, as I understand, they don't have a history of this kind of behavior. They're pretty decent kids. But what usually happens, you get this one charismatic individual, and they lead other people to do things that they normally wouldn't do. Wow. It is situational ethics, it is situational force, and unfortunately, our children are not trained, they're not prepared on what to do when those situations occur.
Wow. We're talking to Paul Coughlin about bullying, and let me ask you this, Paul. Is there any connection to bullying with entertainment? and or the lack of the value of human life?
Oh, that's great. In fact, I wrote an article about the violence in video games and how there seems to be a connection between that and antisocial behavior. And I was contacted by a representative of the bullying or the gaming world. Yeah, and I ignored it. I kept going, but yeah, they're probably. I don't see how there couldn't be. Violent video games, they have to have some form of effect on a person's life, and there seems to be statistics that support that. But Perry, we just live in an increasingly uncivil society. I would point my finger more at reality TV than video games. Reality TV is largely, though not exclusively, it's sewage. It's absolute sewage.
I mean, they're hating one another, they're swinging at each one another,
and they're making money.
And they're cussing at one another,
and they get endorsements. You get ahead. Unfortunately, what are our children learning? I mean, it's shame on us as adults, right? What are they learning? You can actually make a pretty good living being an awful person.
Yeah,
that's what we're learning, and it's. I don't know if it's going to get better anytime soon. I wish it will. I think what's going to happen, Perry, is going to get better in pockets of resistance. And it's been our hope that the major pocket of resistance would be the church. We're kind of moving that direction, slowly moving that direction. We do have a unique partnership with Saddleback Church. We have a unique partnership with Bethel Church in Richland, Washington, and Sugar Creek Baptist Church in Houston, Texas, or just outside Houston.
Yeah. Well, so what are you saying to these churches? Are you asking them to get into the community and monitor this?
Yeah, that's actually part of their, they see that as their ministry to the community, that they give to the community. Sugar Creek, Bethel, Saddleback, of course, is probably the best known. We're aligning with their justice ministry, we're aligning with their high school ministry, with their parenting ministry groups, and we're providing a holistic approach to diminishing an intentional form of abuse. Perry, it's the only intentional form of abuse that we tell the most vulnerable among us to just ignore. Think about that. We just tell kids to ignore it. There's not an adult watching us today. Gandhi couldn't ignore the behavior that we expect our children to put up with on a regular basis.
All right. We're talking primarily young people in schools, but this carries on into adulthood, doesn't it?
It sure does. You know, Perry, they've studied the psychological impact of bullying in the workplace, particularly on women, and they have found that it is the same as people returning from war.
Really?
It's the same effects.
Wow.
Tends to be harder on women than men. So if any of our viewers are going through that right now, chances are, in many cases of bullying and harassment in the workplace, you just got to find out what the law says. Are they breaking the law? Because they're certainly breaking moral and ethical codes. But breaking moral and ethical codes doesn't mean you're going to have much retribution. The real issue would be, if you want to keep that job, stay in that job, can you prove it's happening to you? And is it worth it? In many cases, Perry, they just should find another job. But what happens to poor people who are victims of abuse, ongoing abuse, they tend to think they don't have very many options, right? But you have way more options than you realize, and you just kind of have to get some strength to you, talk to some friends.
Can you be bullied and not know it?
Yeah, you can, particularly people who have experienced profound abuse as kids. It just seems normal to them, right? And then after a while they wake up and they realize, you know, usually it's someone else from the outside saying, you know, that's wrong, what's happening to you, you should do something about that. Unfortunately, in church, some people who have experienced profound abuse can get some horrible, horrible advice. It's when Paul wrote about the conflict and resolving conflict in Scripture, I don't believe in most cases, most of the time, he was writing about a bullying relationship. He was really writing about two people who just don't get along. It's conflict. Bullying is not about conflict. It's about disdain and contempt for another human being. It is the language and behavior of superiority and supremacy. Most bullies believe they are superior to other people, and that's why they're often so arrogant and prideful and audacious. And I would encourage our viewers to use the audacity of the bully against them during
How do
this.
you do that?
Oh, well, during this interview, I've had this pen in my pocket, right?
Right.
It is a functioning pen.
Don't tell me you just recorded me.
Well, I could have.
I don't used to trust you, Paul.
I don't have it armed. I don't have it armed.
Yeah.
But see, look at that.
Oh, microphone.
Yeah, it's a it's a USB port. It's a high definition audio and video recorder.
Okay.
Reinhold Niebuhr, the great theologian, and who was on the cover of Time magazine at one time. Imagine a theologian on the cover of Time today. He said that the children of light must be as clever and as shrewd as the children of darkness, minus the malice. If we want to escape the theater of bullying, you're going to have to start kicking your mind into gear. You're going to have to start outthinking the bully. And that's pretty easy to do because they're audacious people. They hang themselves. They overstep. They think they're the brightest person in the room, and they're not. Use that against them. Record their behavior. Right here, Perry, is an undercover camera, and that's high definition as well. We rent this out to, and there's a microphone, right? There's a microphone right there. We rent this out to children who are targets of serial bullying. We just were contacted yesterday from a mother whose son was being bullied in Boy Scouts. She has gone numerous times to the leader, and she says nothing's being done. We're going to help wire him up.
Wow.
Perry, these children are not going to escape the theater of bullying without hardcore evidence that it's happening to them, because most people in authority don't have the training to spot it, let alone effectively intervene. We need to help them do their job.
Wow. All right. Let me just, before I take a break here, protectors, people who want to get more about you and your group and what you do, where do they go?
They can just go to theprotectors.org, and from there they can find out that we have a unique dual track. We have a faith-based track and a public school values-based track. And then if they want to contact me directly, the information's there.
Okay, and that's theprotectors.org.
.org.
All right, theprotectors.org. All right, now, have you used this? Has it worked?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me a story.
Oh, date night.
Really?
It's Sandy. So usually it's Thursday nights. It's nothing bad, Perry. Nothing bad, please. And so we'll be at we go to Bamboo or whatever for date night, and I'll just be asking her questions, and she'll go, "You're recording me, aren't you?" Yeah. So I mean, I've been testing it out, and it works. It's high definition. I've got the recorder in my pocket right here. It's about the size of a cigarette
pack. So you're going to
pack.
wire up a young person or somebody who's being bullied, and then what do you do with this information? Now, they come back. Let's say you got the evidence. What do you do with it?
Well, you give it to authority in that situation. Now, this is very interesting information, isn't it? Now, some people, again, worry about the legality of it. Keep in mind that the rights that we receive as adults are often not afforded to kids. So if you're worried about recording a person without their consent, consult with an attorney. I'll tell you that in Oregon, you can record video without a person's consent. You just can't record audio. Right. But keep in mind that there's over 1.5 pages of statutes for exceptions. So, and one of those exceptions might be the lesser of two evils argument, which is that if you were to tell the person the audio is being recorded, it might put you in personal danger. So it's the same argument that people use when they're rushing their wife who's in labor to the hospital. Yes, it's true, I did speed, I may have gone through a light, but the damage that would have been done if I didn't do that would have been more extensive. Anyway, judges decide these things.
I'm surprised that we just stand by and let it happen. Why does that happen? We see somebody that is bullying somebody else, and we try to put it in the levity category and maybe laugh it off. Why do we do that? Well,
I think a lot of it has to do with fear that you might be next, or the person might turn on you. At the younger ages, there's a problem with adolescent bullying. Studies show that as you get older, your capacity for courage actually increases. So at the younger ages, we have kids whose capacity for courage is still pretty low, and we want them to intervene and help. Fear that they're going to be, again, fear that they're going to be next. Sometimes at the younger ages, they're not exactly sure it's bullying at first, but after a while, it becomes more apparent. At the younger ages, they don't want to be seen as a snitch or a tattletale, and that's a big one. So when we go into schools, we talk about the difference between reporting and tattling, and we have some pretty good antidotes there. You know, only about 13% of bystanders ever intervene in regard to bullying. 40 to 60% of the bystanders will actually join the bully in the assault, either overtly or covertly. They'll either cheer on the incident, or they'll snicker, laugh, point afterward at the target, and it's all very horrible. And more progressive schools are actually saying that if we catch you applauding, laughing, pointing during the event itself, you will be treated as if you did the bullying as well. You'll be punished. More forward-thinking school districts are saying, Perry, that if you have an established case of serial bullying, that the bully is the one who transfers to another school, not the target. So there has been some neat changes in the school system on this issue.
All right. I know you've had some. Why don't you share that letter with us before we run out of time here?
Oh, sure. Well, Perry, there was a young lady named Coughlin Boris. She was a 15-year-old at Albany High School. And in September of last year, the day before school began, she took her life. And I wrote an article that was posted on a number of websites called "What Really Killed Coughlin Boris." And we're familiar with the scripture that hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And it was really a lack of hope for this young lady. She was horribly bullied in school, and she had footballs thrown in her face. People told her she was ugly. People told her she should go home. People told her she should go kill herself. And she eventually did. So I wrote this article, and I received probably one of the sweetest letters I've ever received. It was from a friend of hers, Coughlin Boris's friend, 15-year-old Brianne Perkins. And I just want to read part of this because this is really helpful for adults. Hello, my name is Brianne Perkins. I'm 15 years old, and I went to South Albany High School, and I'm proud to say that Coughlin Boris was one of my most dearest friends. I hope she felt the same way about me. I just heard about your article earlier today and decided to read it, and I just want to say a few things. First, I don't even know how to describe the way your article made me feel, but the closest thing I can come to is relief. Your article has put to light what we as children have been trying to say for years. I'm glad that you wrote this article because I feel like people will now understand what we have been trying to say, since it is coming from a mature adult's point of view. Second, I like what you wrote about churches. I'm trying to get churches, Perry, to step up to the plate, to get off their blessed assurance and do something about this. I myself am a Christian and absolutely do not tolerate any sort of bullying, but I also have been bullied to the point of loathing myself. I also find in my situation that my fellow Christians do most of the bullying.
Wow. I'm concerned today it appears that young people are forced to grow up real fast. I mean, just like the culture is trying to get them to become beauty queens or superheroes on the athletic field. And there are just some kids that can't transition that fast, and they become the targets. Is that true?
Certainly. Beauty is currency for women. Athleticism is currency for boys, and vice versa, I suppose, or being handsome for boys. And what we do is, it's cachet. They're the rock stars usually of a school. And we encourage the kids who have that power to use it on behalf of others. Particularly athletes, Perry. Athletes set the moral thermometer in most any youth group, whether it be a public school, private school, youth group, Sunday school group. And they have such great potential for leadership in that area, to use really a God-given ability. I can tell you as a coach of almost 15 years, not that many people are natural athletes. You either got it and you don't, and in most cases, most of the time, they did nothing to make that happen. It was given to them. So it's a gift, very much like charisma, and we need to be encouraging our children, not someone else's, our children to use that gift on behalf of other people. It gives them a platform that really unlike any other in a youth setting.
What can you say to parents who need to be maybe conscientious of how they are treating their own children? I mean, it could be a parental, and then these kids carry it off to school.
And that's one of the reasons why the Protectors has fallen under the parenting ministry at Bethel Church, because they recognize it really comes down to parents, Perry. What creates a bully? In many cases, many times, it's coercive parenting style. The parents are bullies, and they create bullies. The parents often have an arrogant orientation toward other people. They express disdain and contempt toward others. And the kids just grow up hearing this and seeing it, and they think that's how you get through life. It's just normal to them. So in many cases, it's the parents who are creating the bully. Also, in many cases, though not all, obviously, it's the parent who's creating the target. And they're doing it through one of the most unlikely means. It is through overparenting, usually, that targets are created.
Really?
Yeah, it creates... Overparenting creates the kind of psychological fracturing similar to neglect and abuse. Because when a parent overparents a kid, the kid gets through this kind of umbilical cord of observation that the world is a very scary place, and it also doesn't really demand a lot from me. I do not have to exert my will to get what I want, because my parents are constantly running intervention. I can tell you as a coach, those are very difficult kids to coach. I want to give them a t-shirt that says, you know, does not play well with others. Because they're just so used, Perry, to things going their own way, again, usually it's the mom, it's a helicopter mom, who is constantly running intervention, constantly intervening on behalf of that kid, and they think they're being loving. They're not. They're creating a fairly weak child.
Got a couple of minutes left. It seems that the subject of bullying has now been made aware of. You got to be pleased with that. I mean, it's getting national attention. It is,
Perry, and we are pleased with that. Unfortunately, when it does get national attention, there are so many myths still being projected about it. I mean, it's still being written about in the media, particularly among journalists, as conflict. As misunderstanding of two kids not getting along. That's not bullying. That is not bullying. And so it's abuse. It's intentional abuse, the superior use of power to intentionally harm, not just hurt, harm another person over a period of time and for no good reason.
What's in the psychic of a person that wants to harm somebody else?
That's a great question. I mean, what you're asking there is the criminal mind, the antisocial criminal mind. What drives it? Perry, that has beguiled mankind for centuries. I will just say this in regard to serial bullies. Your average serial bully has average to excessive self-esteem. They do not have low self-esteem on average. Now, of course, some do, but that's not the body of the bell curve. The body of the bell curve, these kids like themselves just fine, and in fact, many like themselves too much. So the short answer would be pride and arrogance. That is what makes a serial bully most of the time, and what they need is humility.
Wow. All right, let me just say, Paul, you're just really a blessing, and it's called theprotectors.org, theprotectors.org. You can see the faith-based and then the school-based one for how to get involved and learn more about it. And you can contact Paul there. Let me encourage you, you may want to have him come and do a lecture in your church, and it's well worth the time and the effort and the expense to do it. Thank you, buddy. Keep up the good work. It's fascinating. It's just fascinating, and we're seeing it played out in the wrong ways in our culture, so we've got a long ways to go on this one.
And we got a long ways to go, and it's our hope that the church will be the tip of the spear.
All right, thank you, pal.
Thank you.
See you next time.